So again, in chapter 4, we're talking about self-realization, enlightenment. Okay? So in verse 22, he says, when the unmoving consciousness of the self assumes the form of intellect, it becomes conscious mind. When the unmoving consciousness of the self assumes the form of intellect, it becomes conscious mind. The mind that is colored by both its object and the self is all-embracing. The mind that is colored by both its object and the self is all-embracing. And the mind, despite its countless separative tendencies, exists for the sake of the self because it is dependent upon it. This is an important verse. The mind, despite its countless separative tendencies, exists for the sake of the self because it is dependent upon it. What is he saying there? The mind, despite its countless separative tendencies, exists for the sake of the self, capital S, the soul, because it, the mind, is dependent upon the self. What does he mean when he says the mind is dependent upon the self?
The mind needs to be, the self needs to give power to the mind. If not, it's not there.
Right, perfect. Right, so from this we can see that the self is higher than the mind.
The mind is just a tool for us to use as needed.
Exactly.
It just exists while the self gives
power. Because it needs to know itself. So it kind of uses the mind. Is that fun? So
well, that's the deeper interpretation. Well, okay. Yeah. That's where I was going. So in other words, the soul needs a mind,
right,
to become aware of itself.
Right.
Okay?
You don't understand?
So so you need a mind to experience things, to be aware of things, right? Your mind is aware of stuff.
Like meditation. When you are the one just being there. You don't need the mind to be there in order that you become yourself. You know.
Why would you meditate? Why do you meditate?
Meditate to reach yourself with a...
What informed you to do that? What made that decision to start meditating?
Self.
Your mind. Your mind makes decisions. Your mind is the thinking part of you. So it took your mind
I think
to
we all
say...
have intelligence. I mean, if the food had intelligence, we don't need a mind to be aware of ourselves. I understand what you mean. I mean,
but food doesn't make decisions.
Think and make all the yes, you need it, but just the conscious that we are there, we don't need the mind.
You need...
Right, but like an asparagus can't make a decision. You know, a tomato can't make a choice.
But we do.
We do. Right, so we have a mind that can make choices that a tomato can't do. A tomato never says, I want to become aware of my own existence, so I'm going to start an intensive meditation practice. Tomatoes don't do that. Right, humans do, because we have minds. And we can make choices, we can make decisions that can lead us to the divine. So we call this free will. We have the ability to choose, to make decisions that can lead us to the divine or lead us away from the divine. Whereas food, vegetables are already, right? They're already at one with the divine. They're nature. They're just consciousness, you know. So we are given a unique opportunity in that we have this mind, that we have this free will. We can make decisions. We can make choices that can either lead us to the divine or can lead us further away from the divine. So this is what makes human beings unique. We have a unique ability to choose.
It seems to me that the self is not limited to our body. It's all out there.
Right.
So the self doesn't really need our body to exist. The self exists in us, outside of us, every place. It's our mind that makes a decision for us to get in touch with that self that exists there, but that we're not conscious of. I think.
Right.
So I think that's why the mind maybe has to come into it Because the self is there. Whether we get in
That's
touch
my
with it or
point.
not,
That's
it's
my
there.
With or without.
Right,
mind,
but
the
for
body
us,
is there.
for this one physical
I
body,
understand that.
to connect with
The
that
mind.
deeper self, the mind has to make that conscious choice to do that.
And
I don't know if that makes
That
sense.
makes
well, well,
That
good.
makes sense.
Well, we talked about duality before. Without, how do you know it's cold in this room if you never knew what hot was? Does it make sense? How do you know what's cold? How do you compare? How do you know what's cold if you never experienced hot?
Yes, you need the body to perceive.
So
Without
so
the body, you don't
so
perceive.
perception. So
Perception.
you need the
Body.
the self needed something to see itself.
That I agree.
So that's what he's saying.
Okay.
That's
That
the mind.
it's the mind is perceiving self. So does it make sense? Like
Yeah.
you have this self, soul, whatever. You need some kind of tool to see you. A mirror. It's like a mirror. It's like you need a mirror because if you have no mirror, you don't know. You need to experience. How do I experience myself? You need something. Create something to experience self. Does it make sense? To look at self like a mirror.
The mind is a mirror.
Yes.
Yoga cleans that mirror.
Okay.
That's what yoga does. We clean our mirror so that there's no dust on it. They talk about this in Zen all the time.
Right.
You know, make your mind like a clean mirror, a spotless mirror. That's like, you know, the protocol for Zen Buddhism. Make the mind like a spotless mirror so that it reflects only you, only what you really are, your
Right.
truest, highest
Wow.
nature.
Yes.
When we think of consciousness, it seems like we think of spirituality, but it seems like consciousness is really within the mind because it's what's going on with our selves. The spirituality doesn't need consciousness, it already is.
Well, the mind is, like you said earlier, is a tool. When you talk about consciousness, consciousness is not the mind. Consciousness is pure existence being, without even the need for anything, right?
Even
So-
like low consciousness, somebody with like 0 to zilch consciousness.
Oh, well, now we're talking about consciousness in different levels.
Yeah.
But let's refer to pure consciousness.
Okay.
Pure, infinite
Just
consciousness.
the top
God.
level, right?
You know, whatever you want to.
Sure.
So, so that kind of exists in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
The mind is different. Mind is a tool that you can use to rediscover your divine nature,
Okay.
to rediscover that pure consciousness.
Okay. That makes sense.
So, yeah, it's really confusing. I still get confused when I think about what's the difference between mind, awareness, consciousness, and I've asked people, you know, that are far more knowledgeable than I am about these things,
Right.
and they, to be honest, don't give very clear answers.
Yeah.
I think they know, but it's really hard to put into words and express.
Can you be more vague?
You know, yeah.
It's
So
experiential. It's like
it is experiential. You know, and the more you meditate, you'll figure out the difference
right.
between mind and self,
Right. You'll feel it.
between your subtle body and mind and self and ego and bliss body, and you begin to discover these layers and experience them. You can talk about them, you can read about them in a book, but until you experience them, you know, you're not going to understand them. You know, I can talk about the subtle body all day, but until you experience it,
Right.
it won't make any sense to you. I can talk about samadhi all day long, especially that one. Until you experience it, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
How can I be here and not be here? That doesn't register. So you just have to experience that, you know. And all of these things. That's why I didn't touch much on the end of chapter 3, where it all talks about his supernatural powers and abilities and things like that. You know, I can talk about those things, but I have no experience of most of those things. So, you know, why even? They're fun to talk about. It's interesting, but until you experience some of these higher states, it's not going to make a lot of sense.
We'll read
Some of
about
this
it
stuff.
if we're meant to learn about it later on.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Did that kind of distinguish between mind and self and?
Right.
And again, it's complicated, but again, the mind is a tool, and it is like a mirror, and we want to clean it. so that we see our purest, truest, highest nature reflected back at us in meditation
While we're in this physical body.
while we're in this physical body. Exactly. So verse 25, all confusion about the nature of the self or soul vanishes for one who has seen its glory. Well, what did we just say? Once you experience it, you have no questions, right? It's all your questions are answered. Then truly the mind begins to experience the self as separate from activity and is naturally drawn toward enlightenment. Then truly the mind begins to experience the self. Okay, so the mind experiences the self as separate from activity. So we can see that the self is kind of opposite from activity. And remember, the word activity in Sanskrit, the word karma comes from the word activity. So essentially he's saying the self is separate from karma. The self is different from karma. The self has no karma. Okay? So once you attain that highest state of awareness and consciousness, karma no longer has an effect on you. Okay? 27. All thoughts that arise to interrupt this discrimination, the discrimination between the self and everything that's not the self, okay? All thoughts that arise to interrupt this discrimination are born of the latent impressions, samskaras, that still exist. So even once you've attained samadhi, that does not make you enlightened. You can attain samadhi and still not be anywhere really near enlightenment. You can attain samadhi and have much higher spiritual knowledge, but still, act a damn fool out in the world. And there's plenty of gurus that do this. They're enlightened masters, and they really are. I mean, if you talk to them and you ask them questions, they fire them right back at you, and it's just obvious that this person is enlightened and has experienced higher states. But then they're out there in the world doing just stupid, ridiculous stuff. Like buying Rolls Royces and having a different concubine for every day of the week and stuff like that. And it's just like...
A different what?
Woman. So, there's a difference between enlightenment and liberation.
Okay.
And we need to draw this distinction. You can be enlightened without being liberated. But you can't be liberated without being enlightened. Enlightenment comes first. Self-realization comes first. And then liberation. Okay? In the Buddhist tradition, you would say, enlightenment comes first, then nirvana. So you have this experience of self-realization through samadhi. And you realize what you are as a spiritual being, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be this perfect moral human out in the world. And that you're always going to act right and always behave right and things like that. The only difference between an enlightened person and a non-enlightened person is the enlightened person knows better. They know better. The unenlightened person is still like a child. They're ignorant. They misbehave. They might kind of know better, but in the true sense, they really still don't know any better. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. But so the difference between someone that's self-realized and not is the person that's self-realized. They might still misbehave and do silly things. But they know better, and actually that can have an even higher karmic consequence than the other. But liberation is something different. Liberation is when you no longer misbehave because you no longer have any desires. Liberation is a desireless, desire-free state where nothing in the world will ever have any satisfaction because it's not lasting. And so you are free from the bonds of karma. You no longer react to any situation. You're always calm. You're always at peace in that perfect, pure conscious state. Okay, that's liberation. That's the final end game, if you will. Okay, so there, again, and it says it right here, and I've seen this with my own eyes, and you can see examples of this throughout human history of people that are enlightened masters have the highest spiritual knowledge, but they haven't burned off all their karma yet. So it's impossible to be enlightened without having burned off all your karma yet. Okay, so you can be enlightened and not liberated. And there are people, plenty of people that attain higher states of consciousness but still misbehave out in the world and still just really don't have their thing together. So there are stages or levels of enlightenment. It's not like you're enlightened and that's it. It's like you're either not enlightened or you're enlightened. It doesn't work like that. There's different levels and different stages. Okay. Verse 28. Talking about the samskaras or latent impressions, these are to be destroyed by the same means as were described for the causes of suffering. So by meditation, right? Yoga. One who has attained complete discrimination between the subtlest level of mind and the self, this is what we were just talking about. So someone who has gotten to such a level that they can distinguish between what is my mind, where does the mind end and the soul start. So they've kind of surfed the waves of that very subtle place in between mind and soul. And they can distinguish between them. Okay? So they have, it says, one who has attained complete discrimination between the subtlest level of mind and the self has no higher knowledge to acquire. They're done. This is Dharma Megha Samadhi, the state of unclouded truth. It destroys the causes of suffering, and the bondage of action disappears. So karma disappears. Now we're getting towards liberation, right? 31. Knowledge that has been freed from the veils of impurity is unbounded. Whatever can be known is insignificant in its light. This samadhi completes the transformations of the gunas and fulfills the purpose of evolution. In other words, samadhi, enlightenment, self-realization, is the purpose of evolution. We talked about that informally a little bit earlier. Everything in this universe has evolved and is evolving toward a sense of completion, or unity, oneness. We are part of that. So when we can experience our highest nature, we experience this oneness, we are fulfilling the very purpose of why the universe is even here. Now the process by which evolution unfolds through time is understood. So you have these realizations, you experience higher states, suddenly you understand why things have evolved the way they have. I think we just touched on that. The last verse, verse 34, page 132. And some translations have a few other verses. This one is with 34. The gunas, the three gunas, Raja, Sattva, Tamas, their purpose fulfilled, return to their original state of harmony. Everything in the universe is trying to find homeostasis, balance, harmony, equilibrium. Everything. Even down to the atom. And expanded out to the universe as a whole. It's always trying to find balance and harmony. So the gunas, their purpose fulfilled, return to their original state of harmony. And pure, unbounded consciousness remains, forever established in its own absolute nature. This is enlightenment.
In a nutshell.
Wow.
The only book you'll ever need for the rest of your life. But if you happen to read Autobiography of a Yogi,
Yeah.
I'm glad you
I'm
reminded
going
me.
to keep pushing that.
Yeah.
Do it.
Until
Don't
everybody's
stop.
read it. That was the most important book I ever read, for sure. But this is probably the second, you know. And what a beautiful, concise, short treatise on spirituality. It tells you everything basically you ever wanted to know. And if it doesn't, you can kind of extrapolate it and pull it out from what it does tell you. And it's so fascinating, and Azu was just talking about this, how science is finally coming back around and proving everything that's in this book. So this book is 2,500 years old, and we're just now getting around to proving that actually everything that's said in here is true and real. It's pretty cool. And even if you didn't have the science, you can just do what it tells you to do in here, and you'll figure out for yourself that everything in here is true. Right? So you don't even need the science, but it's nice. It sure is nice to have that backup, you know, that evidence, real tangible evidence that we can look at and say, oh wow, he had it right. This is all real. It's really happening. So the path to enlightenment set forth in this book is pretty straightforward. He doesn't go into a lot of detail, as you noticed, about specific asanas to do, specific pranayamas to do, specific meditation techniques to do. But luckily there are other yoga books that do go into more detail. And that's kind of what we've drawn our modern hatha yoga practice from. But this is the keystone to all yoga, this book. I mean, this tells you everything you wanted to know about yoga. The 8 limbs in particular. It's just a beautiful system that, again, you can add to any religion. Christian, Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, it doesn't matter. Just start doing a little asana, pranayama meditation, and you're just going to be a better whatever you already were. You know, so you don't have to have a specific religious belief system to even practice what's in here. It's a science, an ancient science. That's what's so beautiful about it. But I hope that you all have enjoyed this book. I think it's just a treasure. I wanted you to get the copies that you got and the translation you got because it's my favorite, and hopefully you'll always have it. You can always look back at it whenever confusion arises. And I mean, sometimes I'll just flip it open and read a couple verses, and it's exactly what I needed to read that day. So pretty cool. Any final questions about anything you want to ask about yoga, philosophy, metaphysics? How all this stuff works, meditation, anything. And if you think of something, you can ask me next week too. But
So you have learned your yoga philosophy of what yoga is. Yoga, true yoga, like what it is. So this is from this principle.
I had a phrase that I wanted to share, but I'm not sure if it's true. It's something that I feel. I don't know if it's factual, but yoga is law. It seems like yoga...
That's a good way of putting it. These are scientific laws. They're scientific maxims and principles that are just laws of the universe. You can't fight it. There's cause and effect. There's karma.
Right.
You do something bad, you're going to get something bad in return. You do something good, you're going to get something good in return. You know, if you don't wake up, you're going to have to keep being reborn over and over until you wake up and you graduate to your next school somewhere in the universe, right? So it all makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
I believe is the original form of yoga. Is it Rajas yoga or
Raja.
Raja.
And that just means
Royal
yoga.
How does that
Raja.
compare to what we're doing?
Sometimes called Ashtanga.
That what do you mean? How?
And so this,
Well, it's similar but different to hatha, right?
no, it's all,
It is part of. Hatha's part of Raja,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
well, Hatha was, I think, a term that came later with the Hatha Yoga Pradipika written by Gorakhnath. I think that was like in the 7th or 8th century or something like that. And that's kind of where that Hatha Yoga got started. But Hatha Yoga is just, yeah, don't get confused. Just call it yoga, and then you won't. You know,
Right.
Raja Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga are both based on Patanjali.
Right.
And they're both based on the 8 limbs.
Right.
And there's a great sort of commentary on the 8 limbs called the Shandilya Upanishad. I think I'm spelling that right. Y'all should read that if you get a chance.
Well, the term hatha means physical practice. So the hatha yoga is encompassing all of your physical, your asanas, your pranayama, it encompasses your meditation. Like it really just encompasses the physical sun and moon, right?
Yeah. So Ha means sun in Sanskrit. Tha means moon. So it's just it's a bringing together, just like Tai Chi and Qigong. It's a bringing together of Yin energy and Yang energy, of Shiva and let me make sure. Yeah, Shiva and Shakti.
Actually, yeah.
So the Shiva comes together with the Shakti.
Shakti
Hatha yoga is also similar to Kundalini yoga. Raja yoga, Ashtanga yoga. These are just it's all the same thing. It's all based on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and the 8 limbs and meditation and samadhi. All of it. You know, they emphasize different things. That's all. It's just a different emphasis, but they're all based on the book that we just read. All of them. So all yoga basically comes from this central philosophy. But Hatha just, again, was a way to bring together Shiva and Shakti energy,
Through-
just like Kundalini,
Through a physical practice.
through a physical practice.
Through,
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
So to clear that up.
Through
Just-
kriyas or actions. Through different kriyas,
Action, right.
you or in asanas and pranayamas and techniques, you bring together.
The sun.
The goal of yoga is to bring together the Shiva energy and the Shakti energy, the male energy and the female energy, into a sort of spiritual sexual union that occurs in the heart chakra and then is brought up to the crown chakra. So they, when you have a Kundalini awakening, not just a Kundalini experience, a Kundalini awakening, the Shiva energy from up here comes together with the Shakti energy from down here. They meet in the heart center, have divine union, and then as that divine union makes its way up to the crown chakra and out the crown chakra, you are enlightened.
So
this was an energetic means by which to become enlightened. They say there's two paths to enlightenment, one through awareness and one through an energetic cultivation, Kundalini. So you can experience enlightenment just from meditation on your highest self and merging your awareness with that. Or you can do different kriyas, physical activities, pranayamas, other things to essentially try and force this union. And it's an ancient science used and utilized to sort of coerce, I don't want to say force, coerce the union between Shiva and Shakti. So, Pata just means sun and moon coming
It's
together.
really a gift.
Great way to
It was a
explain.
gift so that more people could attain enlightenment, more souls can attain enlightenment.
Yeah, exactly. It's a shortcut. There's
Yeah.
lots of shortcuts to enlightenment.
Mm.
They came up with one. Meditation is a short. All these things are shortcuts. Everything we do is essentially, to get us from, here to here would take a real long time, right? Many, many incarnations. Well, yoga just does this for us, right? And it just creates this nice little shortcut, a little loophole, a little wormhole that we can just dive through to our true nature without having to go through the natural cycle of thousands of incarnations to grow and burn off karma and all that, which is what we normally have to do. So this gives us a shortcut, a way to sort of short-circuit the system. It's a nice little loophole to find enlightenment quicker and easier. And there are other shortcuts, but I think that yoga is the healthiest one, most natural. Yeah.
So I wanted just to understand, you mentioned the Kundalini experience is this one, the way the movie and all that, that you feel the vibration in the spine, whatever. And this Kundalini enlightenment means the energy, the male energy and the female energy coming together into the heart and boost that energy to your crown and boost to the, that's the action of enlightenment.
Yes,
And
if
that
you come
you-
about it from an energetic standpoint, that's how it happens, energetically.
Energetic, right.
But there's another
We had a
path
big
to
conversation
enlightenment,
about that.
which is just to meditate, right, and become aware of your true nature. This is what we're talking about more often than not. The Kundalini is more esoteric and very occult and very secret. So this is like the more utilized path and probably the healthiest and easiest path. Kundalini it's more secretive, it's more esoteric, it's more occult, So
Occult, what is occult?
secret and
Why?
why is Kundalini secret? Because I think so few people have had a Kundalini awakening. Some people have Kundalini experiences and things, but so few people have actually experienced the real Kundalini, what I just described.
What you described, exactly.
So few souls have actually experienced that I guess a lot of people don't think it's real or doesn't exist, or that it's so hard and just so complicated and complex and difficult to do that I'm just not even going to worry about it, So meditation is the easier way. Bringing through awareness
But
is
this
the easier way.
Kundalini awakening is also through meditation. or
It can
Or
happen.
it cannot. I mean, if there's another way,
So a lot of people say, though, that even through meditation, when you bring your awareness and when you do finally have that awakening of self-realization, enlightenment, that sometimes they do have like a Kundalini experience, but not always. Not all enlightened masters awakened through a Kundalini experience. Okay, so in other words, you don't have to have some crazy Kundalini experience to be enlightened.
But again,
But some enlightened people have experienced these things.
so again, I come to my first question, I think at the beginning of the sutras. Is there a way that you know you are enlightened? That you reach enlightenment? Because you now mention
All the
this
masters say,
energetic aspect of it,
Right.
but how do you reach and say, oh, I came to enlightenment?
the masters say that once you're there, you just know. That's it. That's the only answer.
But I mean, I had to
You can
ask
read
it now
books.
after the book.
You can read books that describe what enlightenment is like and that describe the characteristics of an enlightened person. I can give you some books to read so that, and it's pretty obvious, people that are enlightened is pretty obvious, and they do have all those characteristics, you know.
Extroversion and maybe a lot of free.
It's just obvious. That's all I can really say. It's an energetic thing, and you just kind of know when you're in their presence. But there are different descriptions of what an enlightened person should look like or does look like in different texts and things like that you can look at and say, oh, this is what an enlightened person looks like. This is how they behave. This is how they act, you know, and things like that. But how do you know? Again, I'll just go with what masters have said. They say when you're there, you just know. Mm-hmm.
But then again, you said enlightened people can still go out and act like fools in the world.
Right.
So their actions may not always correspond with what an enlightened person should do.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's the liberation that's the real.
The real goal.
So
yeah.
being enlightened doesn't necessarily mean you're perfect, or
Right.
No.
you act
Right.
in accordance with.
But definitely
Right.
you
Teachings.
won't do something against the 8 lines or
Oh, they do. Yeah. I mean, there's enlightened masters.
with her eyes.
I don't want to name names, and you know, but there's been plenty
Oh yeah.
of enlightened people that act very, very foolishly,
Yeah.
and they get
badly.
into
I mean,
doing silly
Yeah.
things.
I mean, injuriously. I
Yeah.
mean,
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
they actually do harm.
Yeah.
they
is
can,
that-
yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
not maybe individually. You know, I mean, they can hurt another individual by their
Yeah.
actions.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
Yeah.
it's an energy gold. It's not like a human spiritual gold, because if it were, these people would not act like that. It's more like energetic.
You have to have liberation, right?
Yeah. So you can be enlightened. You can have knowledge of your higher spiritual nature, but still have desires and still have karma.
Yeah.
Attachments.
Being enlightened does not mean being karma-free. Being liberated means being karma-free. Does that make sense? So enlightenment, you can still have karma. You can still be hanging on to things, still have attachments, patterns, habitual patterns and things.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the ultimate goal is liberation. The ultimate goal is to be in a desire-free state where you're perfectly content in any situation. You don't react. You're just the witness all the time, period. Liberation is when you are the observer 24/7,
And honestly, I
all
don't
the
think
time.
I don't think it's this is something that if you're on this planet, you know, I don't think you wouldn't be here if you're like, if what he's talking about in terms of, you know, you wouldn't be here. So enlightened masters, gurus, whatever, that are here and they are enlightened and they're liberated, they wouldn't be here, or they would leave. What I mean by that, meaning they would move on,
Mhm.
pass away, die, whatever.
Or
They
move
say
on to
that
the next
some-
plane of existence, or
Right.
whatever.
They wouldn't be here. They'd leave, or somehow
They,
it's
they
like
say they say some choose to come back.
some
to help.
right.
But
to help.
what it's
Like Buddha or
is
Jesus.
saying the highest truth right now. Like, you know, so if they were really liberated, like the highest high state, what are you doing on planet Earth, man?
Right.
You know, and there's some other
There's like
Shouldn't you be going to like the MIT of the universe by now? You're like stuck here at Gainesville Community College. Come on, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, so it's right, you know, I mean, if you're still here, you still have stuff to work out.
Right. No matter how enlightened.
Mhm.
No matter how enlightened, you still
They are.
have
They have
your
something
stuff to work out. So
You
there's
just-
different levels.
You
It's like
haven't
a
reached that
continuum.
final step yet.
Right.
Yeah, I guess you can say, because like you said, you could have been like, come back and do some work, but you're in human form. You still have a mind. You still have to make choices. So you're still human, but you're not. That's where it gets a little, because it's like you're still human yet you're liberated. You know, so this is where it gets a little. It's just you're still. You still have to. It's like when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So it's like we said before. You know, you're still doing. You're still part of that. You're still part of the energy of the planet. So when whatever the energy of the planet is in, you're still a part of it because you're here. I mean, you wouldn't be here. You'd be in another planet or somewhere else or whatever, in another dimension. Whatever.
Yeah, we come here to heal our junk. So if you didn't have junk, you wouldn't be here to heal your junk.
Right. Or to help others heal their junk, but at the same time, you came back here. I'm sure you're gonna have some junk or accumulate some junk that you're gonna need to work out.
What it's saying is nobody's perfect.
Right.
Even
Right.
gurus.
Right.
Even the enlightened masters, the supposed whatever, they're not perfect. They're just not. There's no such thing. You know, we kind of already touched on that. So we're striving toward perfection. We're evolving toward perfection, but we're here. So we're not perfect.
No,
if we were, we wouldn't be here. You know, so it's like.
And I think that with that said, I think it's a planetary, a human thing. So it's not just one person becomes enlightened and they're helping everyone else. It's everyone needs to be enlightened, and we all need to be helping each other. That's really the main goal. This is why if we see enlightened masters coming back, it's because they're trying to help the whole planet, the whole human race, to work it out and let's get stuff going, and we're trying to evolve the whole planet, all of us as a people, to evolve, not just one person. Of course, we have to work one by one, open up one person at a time, but at the same time, we all have to do it together. Does that make sense?
They say that when one person wakes up, that it has a collective effect on the collective consciousness of all sentient beings everywhere.
Right.
So every time somebody pops and wakes up, the whole collective consciousness is made just a little bit brighter.
Right.
So that's pretty cool, that we can have that effect collectively on the rest of consciousness, or the great mind, or whatever you want to call
The collective. That's
the
why
collective mind, collective consciousness.
Right. That's why what we were just talking about earlier over there. That's why it's important. Each of us are doing our work or doing our practice because we're evolving ourselves. We're reaching to that point of enlightened liberation, whatever. We're reaching to that point through the practice.
Yeah.
So because we're helping others doing the same by doing our own practice. So
yeah, that's right. When you do yoga and when you meditate, you affect everything else in the universe.
right, because we are connected to the universe.
Right.
So that energy gets transmitted.
That's beautiful.
So
Yeah.
yoga in a nutshell.
We have a great responsibility.
We do have a great
Yes,
responsibility.
and we're very powerful.
We are.
We don't think how powerful we are. We're very powerful.
We're
We
all
have a lot.
sleeping gods.
Yeah.
So my guru told me once that you're a sleeping god.
You're right.